Welcome to Photoactive, a podcast about photography and technology. I'm Kirk McElhearn.
And I'm Jeff Carlson.
You can find show notes, including any photos we discuss in this episode, at photoactive.co. That's photoactive.co. So this is one of those weeks when we get to talk about new Apple hardware. But first, we have an announcement from the Adobe Industrial Complex.
Lightroom has just been updated. And you're like, yay, yeah, whatever. Software gets updated all the time. Here's the cool thing about the new versions of Lightroom Classic and Lightroom Desktop, and actually the Lightroom mobile apps too. They have finally now incorporated Generative Remove. So all of the Photoshop excitement of the last year has been generative fill. So it's using the Firefly AI image generation technology, where you could go in and you can type dragon in the sky above tall trees, and it'll just make that for you. And that's nifty. And in Photoshop, it's been great because you can remove certain areas. Like, let's say you have a car that's parked on the side of the road that you want to get rid of. Well, now you don't have to go to Photoshop for that. You can do it directly within Lightroom, which is pretty cool. And they've made it very specific to what you would do in Lightroom, which is you want to erase something. You want to erase, normally we're talking about dust spots or sensor spots or maybe like a piece of trash on the ground. And the existing remove tools would work fine for that. But if you have anything bigger, those tools would not really work because they're trying to grab pixels from elsewhere in the image to fill that space in. And so sometimes it's smart about it.
So is this what you would call the X removal tool?
This is definitely the X removal tool.
The X partner, spouse, boyfriend, girlfriend.
Get rid of your ex,
you've got this photo with, 6 people and you've got your ex in the photo and you don't want them there. You replace them with a fire hydrant.
Yeah, exactly. And so the way it works in Lightroom is you select your area, and I think it's still being labeled as like a early access feature because you're not always going to get perfect results every time, but you select what you want and then you click apply and it just figures out what should be in that space. It'll give you 3 different options. So in the example I said with the car, like you select the car. I'll put some images in the show notes that I made for an addendum for my Lightroom book that's going to be coming out soon. And basically, there was a car on the side of the road, but it was behind a tree, and I wanted to get rid of that. Trying to do that with the regular tools was basically impossible. And here, what it did was it regenerated that area, made a realistic-looking tree section, road section, based on what the context looks like should be there. And it does a really good job. Now, what it does not have is the ability to say, I want a red car there, or I want a cat behind the tree. It's just trying to remove things. I know we've talked about AI before, but this is sort of a little bit of a hallucination in the sense that sometimes you'll get something else. Like I've had experiments when I've tried to remove something. I've tried to remove a dog or a fire hydrant, and it will just put in another dog or some other animal or whatever. So as is the case with generative imagery, you don't always know what you're going to get until you're going to get it. For the most part, it's going to look at that, and when you select something and you don't give it any text inputs, it'll just assume that whatever that object is needs to be removed. And I think most of the time it works that way. Every once in a while, you'll get weird nightmare baby sitting on the ground or something. But this is really cool because when you have smaller things that you want to remove that won't work with those typical remove tools, you don't have to send it out to Photoshop and round trip it back. So that's actually really pretty cool.
It doesn't make sense to me that you have to use both Lightroom and Photoshop for as many things that you do. It makes sense that over the long term, Adobe rolls these things into Lightroom, but keeps them in Photoshop, right? For people who aren't using Lightroom, who are just using Photoshop, it doesn't make sense that you've got to do a back and forth because it gets complicated. They've got the technology and the tools to be able to simplify this. You're basically duplicating code from one app into another. And it shouldn't be hard. So maybe going forward, they're going to do more of this. And I can understand if in Lightroom, it might be a bit more limited than in Photoshop because it's designed for photos, whereas Photoshop is designed for all sorts of illustrations.
Yeah, exactly. Basically, Photoshop is the big testing ground, and that's where they can do a whole lot of stuff. And then Lightroom can pick and choose and say, look, we don't need all of these features to regenerate a background or whatever. What we need is a tool that most photographers are going to use, which is I need to remove something that shouldn't be in the frame and do it in a way that's more realistic, especially for like larger areas like this. So it's actually a pretty cool implementation. And in my testing so far, it does a good job in that sense of nobody should notice that this has been removed. And sometimes with the other tools, you'd see haloing or repeated patterns or whatever. So that's out. That's the big thing that's out there. For people who use Lightroom Desktop, there's a very cool feature that I haven't seen mentioned much yet because the Generative Remove is going to be the big news about this. So part of the thing about using Lightroom Desktop is that everything gets synced to the cloud. And in October, they introduced a feature where you can get files from your local drive and they don't have to go to the cloud. In this, they've added an archive feature. So let's say, hypothetically, you were standing outside a couple of weeks ago looking at the auroras and shot 500 photos of a time lapse. That's not hypothetical. I did that. It was really awesome. But now I switched it to JPEG, but I still had gigabytes of essentially the same photo because I wanted to, create a time lapse of it. So what I can do is I can select those and I can archive them locally so that they aren't taking up my cloud space allotment. And so now I can go back and I have series where I was shooting like surf hitting rocks. Well, the way you do that, if you're not trying to do a long exposure, is you put it on burst mode and you end up with hundreds and hundreds of images looking for that right combination of the surf and the water and the spray and all that. So like I have gigabytes and gigabytes of those just stored on my hard drives, but also stored in the cloud. So that can be now just archived, which is nice. So
I wish Apple would do that where cloud storage is limited and you have to pay a little bit more for it. The thing is, though, you have hundreds and hundreds of these photos. If you found one that's good, why didn't you just delete all the others, Jeff?
That is also a possibility that I just haven't gotten around to.
See, I actually did. That to me is like the first thing I do. I've told you that I don't import photos into my photos library. I look at them on disk. I say, okay, this is the one I want to keep. The others, maybe I'll keep a few in my folder, but not import them anywhere and put them in the cloud.
Yeah, I do that purely for convenience because it's easier to just dump the cloud into Lightroom and then it'll sync and whatever. And then, soon I will go back through them. Now, to be fair, in this specific example where I did shoot hundreds of shots there was a lighthouse in a rock. It was a beautiful sunset location. I did go through and remove a bunch of them, but not all of them. And so I think I can do another.
Because you never know when you want to go back and choose a different frame.
You never know. That's exactly it. That's exactly it. 5 years from now, I'll be like, no, the one I picked was the wrong one. This is the masterpiece. This is how photographers' brains work. So anyway, new Lightroom, if you are part of the industrial complex, Adobe industrial complex, go update because there are new cool things to play with. And I'll just put a plug. Sometime in the next couple of weeks, this addendum for my Lightroom book will be out. It'll be a free download, and we'll put information in the show notes when it appears. Okay, so new iPads. On your new iPad Apple event bingo card, which did last 35 minutes, as I said. I did remember. I was super impressed.
Did you have on your bingo card, I want a thinner iPad, yes or no?
Well, as someone who follows Apple, I want
yes
everything.
Or no, yes or no, yes or no.
No, I did not.
Did you have on your bingo card for the new iPad, I want only one rear camera.
No, that was a surprise.
Did you have on your bingo card for the new iPad, I want to pay $200 more than the previous model?
Want to or expect to? Want to? No. Expect to? No.
Okay. And did you have on your bingo card the M4 processor?
No, that was a surprise as well.
Okay.
There's also one more surprise that was on your bingo card, and I am hoping that the people listening to this actually know what we're talking about when you say bingo card. Nano textured glass. Did you expect that?
I actually don't think about that as a thing.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, it's like, it's not there. I've heard that it exists. I've never seen it. I think it'd be great on an iPad if you're working outdoors. I can understand people who want to use it indoors to cut off as much glare as possible and to get a matte finish. Even better on an iPad, totally. However, the display on the new iPad is so good that you're only going to really need it if you're in the sun, right? If you can angle it away from the sun, the brightness of this, it's as bright as the current iPhone at 1,000 nits. The quality of the OLED display is quite impressive. Oh, did that make it clear that I actually bought one of these things? Because
that was going to be the next question.
Right.
On your bingo card, did you think you were actually going to buy one? Because if I remember correctly, you were saying that you didn't think you needed one unless they were going to upgrade the Mac Mini, which they did not. They very specifically was like, oh, and we also have the Mac Mini in our – sorry.
The iPad Mini.
The iPad Mini. See, all the naming conventions, blah.
Yeah.
So you said that's what you really wanted. And when the event happened, it was literally an afterthought that they were saying, and the iPad Mini is still in our lineup.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
my iPad Pro was 3 years old, and I figured this would be a good time because of other reasons that I will mention to get the new iPad Pro. The display is amazing. It really is. It's, there's something about the iPad, and it's all the Mac people have written about this. It's like great hardware, but the software doesn't do much. But there's still something magical, and I hate using that word because it's such an Apple word. It's such a Steve Jobs word. But there's something magical about a tablet compared to a phone, that it's bigger and that it feels science fiction-y, whereas the phone doesn't. The phone, it goes in your pocket. And looking at the display on this, looking at the viewing angle, because that's what the OLED display does. It gives you a really good viewing angle. You can view it at like a really acute angle and still see the screen really well. It adds to the magicality, magicness, magicianability, or whatever Apple term would like to come up with. I bought the 11-inch. I've had 11 inches for, well, almost all my iPads except for the minis have been 10, 10.5, whatever, 11. I did buy the 13 when it first came out and returned it because it was way too big and way too heavy. I don't think I'd want the 13. I can kind of understand someone who buys the 13 along with the Magic Keyboard to make a pretend laptop, but for what it costs, why not just buy a laptop, right? The iPad doesn't do as much software-wise. But for me, the 11, it's still bigger than what I want, but the quality of the display, I was working on an article this morning and I was looking and I was just marveling at how I could tilt it and still see the text, whereas you don't see that on an LED display. Even the previous model that had a micro mini magic LED, whatever they called it. I've gotten used to OLED because I've got it on my iPhone. I think I had it on my last two iPhones. I've got an OLED TV. You get blacks, you get good contrast, you get HDR, and that viewing angle thing makes a huge difference. Now, the thinner iPad, for me, the 11-inch is only 0.3 millimeters difference in thinness. There was a bigger difference for the 13. In weight, it's a little bit lighter, but there's not as much difference in weight as on the 13. Essentially, what Apple did is the M4 processor uses a second generation 3 nanometer technology, whatever.
This is where you come, everybody, for the high technical expertise that you're expecting from us.
Well, basically, it uses so much less power that they could afford to make the batteries smaller. And in the 13-inch, it makes a bigger difference. So it's thinner and lighter and thin. It's the thinnest. This is the thinnest object that Apple has ever made, even thinner than the iPod Nano. And I love that reference to the iPod Nano that's been it's been 10 years since the iPod Nano was discontinued. So I don't
Yeah.
notice the thinness that much. What I do notice is the weight. I have the Smart Folio, and I always protect my iPad displays with something. That Smart Folio and iPad weigh 100 grams less than the previous, my 2 generations ago, iPad and Smart Folio. So it's about 626 compared to 722 grams. Not a lot, but it's noticeable, that 100 grams difference.
This episode of PhotoActive is brought to you by PhotoScout by Cascable. Have you ever planned out a landscape photo shoot and gotten skunked by the weather? Or maybe you have a nearby photo spot picked out, but don't know when the conditions will be right to get dramatic photos. PhotoScout is the intelligent photo assistant that can point you in the right direction. You may already have a few apps that will let you check the weather and see where the sun will appear in the sky at sunset or sunrise. Those are helpful, to be sure, but you need to go chasing that information. PhotoScout is an app that does the work for you in advance and tells you when to go get that perfect photo. You set up the criteria you're looking for, such as a vibrant sunset at a particular location, and PhotoScout will tell you the next anticipated time they're going to happen. You can even set up scenes that will tell you when the moon will be perched directly over a mountaintop, or when auroras are likely to be active and visible. PhotoScout has you covered with all that and more. You say where, PhotoScout says when. Check it out with a free trial today at photoscout.app. That's photo-scout.app. So I have the previous generation 11-inch. I will take it and read a bit before bed. I also have a third-party folio, basically, a magnetic cover. And I find that even though it's not very big and not very heavy, I still take the iPad out. It's just heavy enough that I can't read for a long period of time unless I'm sitting up and I've got it, stabilized in front of me and all that. Just like when I'm just wanting to just read it or, scan the news or whatever. And so I hate to say it because everybody makes fun of, Apple's obsession with thinness and lightness. A thinner and lighter iPad, that is a practical, tangible advantage, not just, oh, look, we did it because we can do it. If you're using it, it actually makes a difference. I also want to really focus on the screen because of anything that was announced, the screen, I think, was more impressive to me as a photographer because I do edit photos on my iPad and it's a great experience. And being able to see that even better, having, like you said, the deeper blacks, extended brightness if needed, that sounds like a really ideal thing. Now, I did not buy one because I couldn't quite justify it. But
see, we were at different generations. Yours was 2 years old. Mine was 3 years old. So I think so.
I thought we both got the M1 at the same time.
Well, maybe we did then. Mine was the M1, 3 years old. I guess that's right. We did.
Yeah, we did. In fact, I wasn't going to. And then you got it and you pointed out how you got a really great trade-in value. Yep. And I was... That sealed the deal. So I have to stop talking to you right now so that I don't go and get a brand new iPad that I don't need right now.
Well, need and, I will agree. The display, if you are editing a lot of photos on your iPad, the display is wonderful. I also got the new Apple Pencil, which now the thing about the Apple Pencil is I had the second generation Apple Pencil, which is not compatible with the new iPad M4 or the iPad Air M2. The only ones that are compatible are the new one and the USB-C Apple Pencil, which doesn't have any of the advanced features. So if you have an existing Apple Pencil for your iPad, you'll have to sell that or whatever because it's useless with the new iPad. I like the new features. I have long used the Apple Pencil as a stylus. I write articles often on my Mac and I edit them on my iPad and I use it. I tap and select and all of that. And I like it. I don't draw. I don't do much like that, but I think it's just a wonderful device for interacting with the tablet. I think I always feel weird putting my finger on a screen. On a phone, it doesn't matter, but on another screen, it feels strange. It feels like, don't sit so close to the TV. Don't touch the TV screen, that sort of thing.
Well, also, I think because we have been using computers for so long, and I can't be the only one who's like this. It creeps me out at a very low level if someone touches their screen, and God forbid that they're going to touch my screen. It's like this weird, and I can't even claim that I have, a pristine, clean screen all the time, but like, I don't want your finger schmutz on my screen. And yet that's exactly what we have on the iPad. So I get that. It's a weird, irrational response. And also why I'm not interested in a touchscreen Mac. Everybody keeps wanting to have a touchscreen Mac, and I don't
No.
get that. Yeah.
No.
I wanted to ask you about the pencil, because what I like using the pencil for sometimes is some photo editing. But what we haven't mentioned is this amazing technical thing that Apple did. Have you seen the shadow, the pencil shadow? Do you know about this?
Yeah, the shadow's
All right.
impressive. So this is the hover feature that shows you where the pencil is going to do what it does. And it shows a little dot showing where you'll tap if you keep moving to the screen. And it has a little shadow behind it to kind of skeuomorphize it in a way.
Yeah. So they have implemented a software virtual shadow that responds to the angle and the rotation of the pencil as you use it. It boggles my mind. And apparently I saw something this last week, someone dug into the code, and it's like a full 3D model to create the shadow. So when you have the pen tool selected, like I think there's an option to have like more of a quill type pen, like it gives you that shape as the shadow. And as you turn, it rotates, and the little hole in the middle of the quill pen also rotates. There's no serious practical reason for this, and yet it is impressive as heck. But go ahead.
There's a feature they call barrel roll. So if you've got like a pen that represents a fountain pen, or you've got a brush, as you turn the pencil, it's going to be like you're turning the pen or the brush. So there is a logical reason to do this, but it is one of those because we can things.
Yes. And it's also because we have the processing power to do it. So it's hilarious to me. It's hilarious to me that people have been saying, look, the iPad has amazing hardware, amazing processing ability, but the software just doesn't keep up. And Apple's response is not, we're going to make iPad OS more friendly or more able to take advantage of this. We are going to probably invest hundreds of thousands of dollars and time and make a shadow for this pencil that maybe half the people won't even notice, but it's there. And I don't know, it's so cool. It's so Apple. And actually, I mean, honestly, again, I'm like you. I don't do a whole lot with the pencil other than annotating and like sometimes I'll make very basic rough sketches if I'm trying to like come up with a photo idea or whatever. For people who are actually artists who are using this, I think that probably is a super cool tactile, keeping you into that artistic moment, right? So you're not being distracted by the technology. So it's fooling your brain a little bit more. I don't know. I'm blown away by this, and I really want to see it in person. But I didn't order one, so I need to like maybe go to the Apple store or something.
You wouldn't be able to use it on your current iPad. It only works on the M4 iPad Pro and the M2 iPad Air. We're not going to talk about the iPad Air because I don't have one. It's substantially cheaper. It doesn't have OLED. It does have an M2 processor, so it's still better than previous. The iPad Pro is the luxury iPad. The iPad Air is the one for everyone. And then the 10th generation is the one for people who don't really care about the hardware and just use it for limited things. I want to get back to the camera, though. The fact that there's only one rear camera and it's still 12 megapixels. You would think that maybe for the price of an iPad Pro, you see there's the word Pro, that they would have brought the 48 megapixel camera in. Maybe it wouldn't fit in the thin body of the new iPad. But
Actually, that's
taking
true.
out the second camera, which of course could be because it wouldn't fit in the thin body of the new iPad as well, the camera bump on this is relatively small because it's just, I don't want to say a cheap camera, but it's just like, it's just a tiny camera bump. When you look at the iPhone or something else, you see, oh, big camera bump, serious camera. All right, look at all those lenses and all this. And here you got the one lens and you got the flash. And then I guess there's a LiDAR as well. Now, they talked about the flash being adaptive so you can scan documents and somehow it'll get the light right. So it's part software and part flash technology. A lot of people have always looked down on people who take photos with iPads as if there's something gauche about it. I have seen so many people take photos with iPads because maybe they don't have a phone. Maybe their iPad's newer. They're tourists and they've got an iPad because they're looking at a map. Well, let me take a photo. I think the iPad Pro should have a better camera. Whether it has two cameras or not, I don't know. But I think it should have a better camera than the 12 megapixel.
Yeah. I have also seen a lot of people do that. And also, I think one of the great appeals of it is you have not just a decent camera, you have a giant viewfinder. If you are older and your eyes don't work as well as anymore and you don't want to focus on a tiny phone, like having this giant slab of a viewfinder is really, I mean, it's super helpful, I would imagine. My guess is Apple basically said, look, people really aren't using both cameras. And the second camera was the ultra wide camera. So it's not like it was even a telephoto camera. And so my suspicion is they probably have data that shows not many people were really using it. And they could pull that out for space reasons or power reasons, or honestly just cost reasons. It's also a little unfortunate because I think with the previous generation, they were really pushing the iPad as like a video recording device. And you could really like use that for, documentary interviews and things like that. Now the iPhone has really taken that place. And especially with the new video app that they demonstrated before when they released these, there's going to be the new, what do they call, Final Cut camera, I think. That's going to be on the phone.
Final Cut camera goes on the iPhone, and you use Final Cut Pro on the iPad, and you can put up to 4 streams live from 4 different iPhones that you can view on the iPad like a director's console.
So I think basically what Apple is saying is, look, if you're going to be shooting any kind of photo or video, you're going to be doing it with an iPhone. If you own an iPad, you probably have an iPhone.
As well as an iPad, yeah.
I guess we just have to. That's just what we have to do.
Well, if you think about it, if you're shooting a film, then, it's a different kind of thing. So just one thing to point out, there are two different models. There is the model that comes with 256 or 512 gigabytes of storage that I believe has 8 gigabytes of RAM. And if you go for 1 terabyte or 2 terabytes, you can get 12 gigabytes of RAM plus the nano whatever treatment, which is $100, which doesn't seem like a lot for Apple. $100 for a feature is pretty rare.
It doesn't, although I think when it seems expensive is the fact that if you want the nano coating, you have to get either 1 terabyte or 2 terabytes. You can't get it on the smaller capacity ones for some reason.
I would say if anyone wants the nano coating, go see one in the store first to make sure you want it, because you can't peel it off or anything. It's like it's like the glass is sandblasted or something, but with nanoparticles.
Yeah, and also it comes with a special cleaning cloth. There's something about that nano texture. You can't just wipe it with a regular cloth. You have to treat it better, which
you have
I'm
to have
very
a $50 Apple cleaning cloth.
Yeah, exactly. It comes with it, but there are issues with how you use it. I've read that it seems that makes it more of a paper-like texture. So not just visible, but when you're using the pencil, that helps. But I don't know. I'm very curious to see how that lasts when you have a device that you're touching all the time on a surface that is more particular than just the smooth glass.
Yeah, it's true that they've had this for a couple of years on whatever the display XDR is, but you're not touching that unless someone comes into your office and points at your screen and touches it and gets you all angry because they touched it.
Exactly.
Snapshots? Have you got something this week?
Yeah, actually, I'm going to do a total self-promotion snapshot. So if you remember that I went to Stockholm last month and I took an unreleased Fuji 16 to 50 millimeter lens with me and shot a whole bunch of photos using that. This was for DP Review to create a sample gallery. And so that lens was announced last week, I want to say on the 15th or the 16th of May. And the sample gallery is now up. So it was a great experience shooting it. Basically, the 16 to 55, it's an f2.8 and then f4.8 on the telephoto side of it. And it's basically like a nice, light, compact zoom. It replaces the kit lens that Fuji has had in most of its other cameras. And it was really an ideal traveling lens. So I'll put a link in the show notes to that sample gallery and also point out it was awfully fun to see some of the commenters say, this is great to have a sample gallery that's not set in Seattle, because most of the DP Review staff is in Seattle. So all the shots are in Seattle. So people are like, it's another city. There are other places that exist. So anyway, Kirk, what do you have this week?
I'm going to mention something that I bought many years ago. It is a pen tip. It's something you put on the tip of your Apple Pencil. Think of it as an Apple Pencil condom. It's a bit of silicone. And what it does is it adds drag to the pencil when you're using it on the display. I can't use the pencil as it is, the plastic on the glass or plastic coated display. And this has just the right amount of drag for it to feel like it's paper. Also, when you tap the display, it doesn't sound like it's going to break. Because the Apple Pencil is quite hard. The company is called Pen Tips. And I believe that when I bought this, it was the first product they released. And now on their website, they have Pen Tips Light. This is the one I have. It's silicone. Pen Tips Fiber, made of some sort of fibery thing. And then they have actual replacement tips for the pencil itself. They have one that's silicone and one that has a metal tip. But that's meant to go over their textured feeling pen mat that you put on top of the iPad. They've got a whole gamut of things basically to make the pencil a little bit better, because the pencil display friction is not for everyone. We'll put a link in the show notes. I strongly recommend, if you use an Apple Pencil, that you look into it. I've got the price in pounds. It's £30 for 5 of the silicone ones that I have. Other ones are different prices. It really makes the pencil for me a lot more useful. My handwriting is so bad that if I'm writing like in notes or something that does handwriting recognition, it's kind of like you're ice skating, the way it slides so much on the thing. And this slows it down. It's really comfortable. So pen tips for your Apple Pencil to keep them safe. Draw safe with your Apple Pencil condom.
Excellent. One last note, we are going to upend our schedule slightly because WWDC is coming up. And so normally we would record on the 4th and release on the 14th, both of these in June. But WWDC is on the 10th. So we are going to record on the 11th and release the next episode on the 21st.
In case anyone doesn't know what WWDC is.
Oh, WWDC is Apple's Worldwide Developer Conference. And that's often when Apple announces things like updates to iPad OS that hopefully take advantage of a new M4 processor and new versions of basically all the operating systems, most of the features, so that developers can start working on them when, say, the iPhone is released in September, October. So,
well, developers and people like us who write about it, we get the betas in June and we start looking, oh, this doesn't work. Oh, why did they do this? How does this work? Oh, and we spend the summer going through this, but it's an interesting period. So yes, WWDC, there's no point in us recording the week before and then having an episode that comes out after and saying, well, WWDC was on Monday and we'll tell you about it next month. So we'll be a little bit closer.
Kind of like what we just did with the iPad announcements. And here we are talking about the iPads.
But was the iPad announcement as important as WWDC, where Apple is going to announce groundbreaking AI tools for its operating systems?
You know what? Everything is groundbreaking AI tool for an operating system. In fact, my breakfast was a groundbreaking AI tool for an operating system. There's so much AI. Anyway.
All right, we'll be back after WWDC. Goodbye.
Okay, goodbye.
Thanks for listening to PhotoActive. You can find show notes, including any photos we discuss in this episode, at photoactive.co. That's photoactive.co. We couldn't afford the end. You can join our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/photoactivecast. That's photoactivecast in one word. You can subscribe to PhotoActive in your favorite podcast app or on Apple Podcasts. See the links on our website. And think about leaving us a rating or review in iTunes or in your podcast.